Peace, family. Y'all know who it is. Kari Lumumba, back once again. The progenitor of LumumbaSpeaks.com, a Black empowerment initiative where we believe we could gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black. Before we get started with tonight's discussion, where we're talking about remembering, of course, Hurricane Katrina, make sure you hit the subscribe and like button. And of course, as you all know, I'm going to be putting the link in the chat if you want to be part of today's conversation. But before we do so, in that we recognize that yesterday, was the 17th anniversary of when the Category 5, peace, I am Mimi, appreciate you, sister, appreciate you being part of tonight's show. Once again, we're going to put the link in the chat so you will be able to chime in and give your perspective on a variety of issues that we're going to be discussing this evening or tonight if you're here on the East Coast. But yesterday was the 17th, of course, anniversary of Hurricane Katrina making landfall just east, of course, New Orleans. And we know that as a result of Hurricane Katrina making landfall, New Orleans was never the same, right? It still hasn't completely recovered from the damage that was done, of course. And so we're going to have a conversation about FEMA. We're going to have a conversation that if there was to be a natural disaster like this once again, could this happen again, right? We're going to be looking at the intersection of race and class, as we know many of the individuals who were stranded, in the city of New Orleans 17 years ago were Black. And of course, the majority of them were poor, did not have the means to, of course, flee the city or seek higher elevation. And as we all know, New Orleans is a city that is actually below sea level, situated between, of course, the Mississippi River, of course, Lake Pontchartrain. But we also, before we really dig into the conversation, want to make sure that we honor the moral responsibility to remember. And what do I mean by that? Queen Mother Fannie Lou Hamer. We all know Queen Mother Fannie Lou Hamer. She was the co-creator and leader of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. And she taught us, brother saying I was there. So we definitely want to get your perspective. So make sure you stick around so you could chime in. Queen Mother Fannie Lou Hamer, one of the greatest in that great line of divine, of course, which is a Pan-Africanist radical tradition of audacious self-assertion in the face, of course, of white hegemony and white supremacy. One of the things she taught us was to never forget where you come from and always praise the bridges that carried us over, right? So one of the bridges that I want to make sure I praise this evening is one Chairman Fred Hampton. For many of you who are unaware, today is the 74th birthday of the chairman of the Chicago Black Panther Party, Fred Hampton. As we all know, unfortunately, on December 4th, 1969, he was assassinated by members of the Chicago Police Department after they worked in collusion with, of course, the FBI's illegal, might I say, COINTEL program. As we all know, Fred Hampton was a progressive African-American leader. He was an anti-racist. He was anti-class as well. He was anti-capitalism. He founded the Rainbow Coalition, not to be confused with Jesse Jackson's Rainbow Push Coalition. But he also worked, of course, with the Young Patriots, in which he organized poor whites. He worked with the Young Lords. I've actually been able to read a bevy of scholarly literature on the Young Lords, which was a Hispanic offshoot, of course, of the Black Panther Party. And he was able even to foster a major alliance among the street gangs in Chicago to help them end the Black fratricide that was taking place and to focus on working for social change. So definitely want to, pay our respects and give a verbal libation to one Chairman Fred Hampton. So before you all lay it down today, just want to make sure that we remember the late, great Fred Hampton. Today, of course, it's his 74th birthday. So with that being said, we're going to move forward and focus on, of course, yesterday being the 17th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, which, of course, at one point was a Category 5 hurricane, making landfall just east, of course, of New Orleans and really decimating the entire Mississippi Gulf Coast, right? So we're talking about from Mobile, for many parts, all the way to the westernmost stretches, of course, of Louisiana. that entire area was decimated, and really, even to this day, hasn't recovered completely from a population standpoint, from a structural standpoint, from an industry standpoint. And so, of course, there were many. We know that one Spike Lee, right? He even made a documentary on HBO entitled "When the Levees Broke," right? We do know. No, I'm not from the Congo, but if you jump on, we can have a conversation. In fact, I'm going to put the link in the chat now. So if you want to come on and be part of the conversation, please do. And then, of course, we know one, Eric Dyson, wrote a very incisive book on, of course, Hurricane Katrina entitled Race. If I can remember correctly, let me make sure I look this up so I'm not misquoting. Misquote the title of the book. Yes, Come Hell or High Water, Hurricane Katrina and the Color of Disaster, right? So we know that's a colorful title, but once again, the title of Michael Dyson's book was, of course, Come Hell or High Water, Hurricane Katrina and the Color of Disaster. I, of course, have read the book. See, I might even have it around here somewhere. I can't find it right now. But of course, I read the book. Great read. And but the argument he's making, of course, is that there was an intersection of not only race, but also class that led to many Black people finding themselves in situations where they were treated as if they were refugees, right? We even know that in the media coverage that took place when the white folks were wading through the water, as our ancestors did many years ago when they were headed north, following the North Star, the Freedom Underground Railroad, what ended up taking place was that when they were wading through the water, that when white folks were doing so, when rummaging and finding food and clothing and resources, it stated that they found some food. If you come on, I would answer your question. If you come on, I will answer your question. Unfortunately, right? But what we oftentimes also found was a situation where when Black people were able to, of course, find resources and wade through the water, it was that they were stealing, they were robbing, they were looting, so on and so forth. And there were even broadcasts on national news publications. We're talking about CNN, ABC News, etc., in which they were calling African Americans refugees. And of course, if you know anything about what is a refugee is someone who's living in a country by privilege, but not by law, not by right, right? And so, of course, we know that Martin Delany, the father of Black nationalism, many years ago, actually almost a century and a half ago, taught us that Black people in America, we aren't actual citizens, we're denizens, right? And that denizens, of course, are living in the country by privilege, not by right. And I think that really was highlighted not only in how Black people were treated after, of course, Hurricane Katrina, and how FEMA, drugged their feet in time coming to help and bring aid, but also in the way that we were depicted, of course, in the media to our white counterparts. So, Brother Nate, what would you like to share on this topic? All right, very good. So the sister's asking, why did I choose the name Lumumba? So I changed my name about 15 years ago. And so as many Black people in the West, when we seek to draw closer ties to our history, heritage, and of course, culture, what we tend to do, of course, is take a name that honors one of our greatest ancestors, right? So, of course, if you know about Patrice Emery Lumumba, born, of course, July 2nd, 1925. Now I'm gonna answer your question, Jason. What we tend to find, Patrice Lumumba is considered the Malcolm X of Africa, right? And so when he was assassinated, many people argue that his assassination was the most important assassination of the, of course, mid-20th century. Malcolm X, when the world found out about assassination, Malcolm X said that he was the greatest Black man to ever walk the African continent. So in honoring Patrice Lumumba and shedding, of course, that European name that was representative of colonialism, imperialism, racism, and slavery, also known as the Ma'afa, the African Holocaust, I took on, of course, the surname of Patrice Emery Lumumba. And my children, of course, when I told them the story about why I did this, my son, he was very young at the time. He said, "I'm very proud of you that you did, and I'm glad I don't have a slave name." So that's the story there. Brother Jason saying, called us Black Americans, not African Americans. We are Afrogenetically, but we are Americans. Yes, well, we are Americans in terms of politically, right? In terms of nationality, but I prefer the term African American. Of course, myself being in higher ed, working in higher ed the past 10 years, being someone who is an African American and someone who studies the history, heritage, and culture, mores and forays of African American community. Many authors argue, many scholars would argue that we use the term African American, which is ethnic, rather than Black Americans, of course, which is racial. So I prefer the term African American, Jamaican American, Haitian American, so on and so forth, rather than Black American, because we do know that during the Holocaust of enslavement, known as chattel enslavement, of course, there was a process of de-Africanization, then of course racialization of our ancestors. And I, of course, I'm all for the process of reconnecting and reclaiming that which was lost in the tradition of Sankofa, and that, of course, is our history, heritage, and culture. Once again, as I always state, on my platform, facts over feelings. And of course, if you make any position, please undergird it with factual information, right? So once again, you could disagree with me as long as the day is long, 24/7, 365. But on my platform, it's very important that a person is promoting, if they disseminate a position, that they undergo that position, of course, with factual information. And that I do that for a couple of reasons. One, I believe it's very important. We know that oftentimes, unfortunately, in the Black conscious community, there is a litany of information out there that tends to be based on misinformation. And we know Malcolm X said many years ago that if the information you have is false, right, if it's putting you on the wrong road, on the wrong trajectory, there's no way you can get to the proper destination. And two, of course, it undermines me and my platform, but allow people to come on my platform and engage in promoting information, of course, that is dishonest or untrue. So with that being said, Brother Nate, is there something you would like to share?
Yeah, can you hear me, bro?
Yes, I can.
Oh, okay. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well.
Yeah, I'm new to your channel. I've actually found out about you through Brother Diallo. I'm actually new to his channel too, so I'm
Okay.
kind of new to everything. Yeah, I'm actually from New Orleans, and
Okay.
I went through Hurricane Katrina. I was out in the convention center,
Mm.
and I've seen a lot of stuff, man. Actually, when the storm happened, I was my mother and I and my brother. We were by my grandmother in New Orleans East, actually,
Okay.
which it was hit real bad out there.
Okay.
And
Now, let me ask this question. I've been to New Orleans before. I actually went to New
Mhm.
Orleans 3 years before Katrina hit. I actually went for Mardi Gras.
Oh,
Um,
really?
yeah, so I was 18 too. So that's a conversation we
Oh,
can have on live, right?
okay. All right, no problem.
But the question I have is: New Orleans East part of the city of New Orleans proper?
Yeah, it's just kind of like it's basically what you would call more the suburbs area of
Okay, got you.
New Orleans.
Okay,
Yeah, the East is at the time when it was, well, the time I was living there was, more developed than what it is now. Of course, a lot of abandoned. They have a lot of abandoned buildings now.
right.
So the economy of New Orleans East is just totally, totally just decimated. So,
Got
but when I was there, everything was developed. But yeah, I've actually after the actual storm passed, I've been wanting to tell people this. I actually seen Blackwater,
you. Now, what do you mean by that?
the military contracting group.
Wow.
Yeah, I actually seen those guys. At first I didn't know I didn't know who they
Right.
were, but as time went on, found out that that was actually Blackwater. I seen the guys with the shirts. I mean, they was in all black. I seen them standing by flowing water. They just was looking at the water, and I looked at them and I spoke to them, and it just they waved back and they spoke back, but
Right.
that was it. I mean, but and then as time went on, I was just hearing more about Blackwater.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then going to the convention center, it was just I mean, it was just chaos, total chaos.
How
I
so?
mean,
Because
well,
we've heard stories, right? And many people have argued that the news sensationalized what took place, right, at the convention centers to try to, of course, depict Black people in a negative manner. What do you say to that?
I honestly, well, for as when they say black people were looting and stuff, just the different terminologies. Yeah, I mean that's kind of typical for the news media here, how they kind of paint us in that particular light.
Right.
But as far as the overall devastation and the chaos, I don't think the news media was able to cover enough, honestly.
Got you.
Yeah, because it was total, a total disaster. I mean, even going to the convention center, and the only reason why they were sending people to the convention center in the Superdome because they promised people they had medical supplies and police, protection for people. So they had all these promises, and they had none of that there.
Mm,
It didn't come till days later,
right.
towards the end. Right.
Got you. Got you. So one of the questions that I've asked is, do you think that there was another natural disaster on the level, of course, of Hurricane Katrina? Now we do know that one of the things that took place was that when a hurricane hit New York City, they shut everything down and nothing went wrong, right? And part of that's because New York City is what many people argue the financial capital of the world,
Absolutely.
not just the global north, right? But if there was a similar Cat 5 hurricane that hit the southeastern United States, and we do know that the majority of African Americans still live in the southeastern United States. That's part of the reason I argue that the SEC has had this college football thing on lock, right? Because of Black athletic talent, and we're going to do a whole nother show on that as well. But with that being said, do you think that this could happen again, right? We do know Spike Lee, he had the documentary When the Levees Broke. Many people made the argument that the levees were imploded to allow flooding in what many people call ethnic areas in New Orleans, so that the white and higher elevation areas of New Orleans wouldn't be flooded. What do you say to that?
Yeah, I've actually heard stories coming up about Hurricane Betsy that was during the '60s. My dad and my grandmother and older people in my family told me about the situation. And one thing you keep hearing is the common theme that there's some kind of manipulation that's going on with the levees to uh, basically allow water to go in certain areas that alleviates the levees on other areas.
Right.
So, and I think this is kind of the role of the Army Corps of Engineers. They would know certain points in the city if it gets flooded because New Orleans is a bowl.
Right.
So if you got levees surrounded around New Orleans, so by allowing water to go in certain areas, it relieves pressure off another area.
Right.
So that definitely, yeah, I can kind of, that statement, I kind of would definitely really agree with that. Even though I don't have any particular, no solid evidence, but like I said, from Hurricane Betsy and on, you just hearing the same theme over and over.
Absolutely. And the fact that it had happened before would
Right.
lead one to what? Come to the conclusion that it was more likely than not that this, of course, transpired, right? And we know
Absolutely.
Black life in America has always been seen as what? Disposable, right? So
Right.
that's unfortunate as well. Once again, just want to take time to make sure you're watching Lumumba Speaks here on YouTube. Here we believe in always betting on Black, and we're talking about the unfortunate 17th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina making landfall one day ago, just east, of course, of New Orleans, Louisiana. And of course, we want to make sure that we honor the moral responsibility to remember, and remembering that today is the 74th birthday of Chairman, of course, Fred Hampton of the Chicago division of the Black Panther Party. So want to make sure that we put that out there. Once again, you're welcome to come on the platform. You don't have to agree with me, right? You could disagree with me 24/7, 365. But all that I ask is that, one, you don't use any racial epithets to describe Black people. That number two, that whatever position that you take is undergirded, of course, with factual information. So with that being said, Brother Nate, I'm going to allow you to continue.
Yeah, and I don't know if you got a chance. I don't know if you heard of this situation. And sadly, I during the time of Katrina, I've heard about it, but it didn't. The news media, I don't know, they didn't really talk about this situation much. But there was a situation that went down in Algiers Point in across the river in New Orleans, which is,
I know what you're talking about.
yeah, they had white militia that was shooting people.
Yes, when black people were trying to seek some redress, they actually walked the bridge. And for many people who don't know that, this is a suspension bridge. So it's like
Yeah,
hundreds of feet off the ground, right? It isn't like just a regular bridge when you're crossing the street somewhere in the city. It's a suspension bridge. And when black folk sought to flee the flooded waters in New Orleans by walking this bridge, which is extremely dangerous to do, as you could speak to, right? And then these
yeah,
white militias would allow them to flee and actually shot them down. Now, I do believe that those individuals that engaged in that heinous act of white vigilantism were arrested, prosecuted, and of course imprisoned. But still, the fact that once again, even in a natural disaster like that, we still find white people, of course, engaging in, of course, white supremacist acts.
yeah. They had a guy that actually he spoke on one of the documentaries dealing with the Algiers Point incident, and he actually lived in that area, and they still treat him as if he was a looter, and he kept telling them, "I live here," and they still shot him anyway.
Right.
Yeah, as far as anyone that was arrested, from what I've seen with the documentary, I don't know if they arrest anyone, but to my understanding, I don't think the investigation went any further into that.
Got you.
Yeah, I will have to look more into that, but yeah, I think that's kind of like one of the things that's just been kind of thrown out in the news media.
Right. So let me ask you this. You stated that you were with your family in the convention center, not the Superdome, correct?
Correct.
And can you share with us, if you're willing to, what you saw or experienced during that time in the convention center after Hurricane
I
Katrina made landfall?
Yeah, I seen very sick people, man, perishing in front of me. I seen an elderly person in a wheelchair. The next morning, they was completely dead.
Mm,
I seen people defecating in the streets because there was no sanitation,
right.
no running water, no toilets working. I was hearing screams at night. They had a situation where it was completely dark, and the police was coming down the little driveway where we were, and the way the convention center is stationed, you have the convention center, then you have the steps, then you have the street, then you have across the street.
Right.
So at the time, we decided to go outside the convention center because it was terrible in there, and so we just had to get out of just being in a confined space like that with just so many people. So we decided to go outside. And one of the biggest reasons we did, because the police were across the street. So we figured that if we get closer over there to where the officers were, we'll have some level of protection. But what they would do is they would come in the daytime and then they would leave at night.
Wow.
Yeah, so you were on your own at night. So we were there at night and it just pitch dark. I mean, just chaos, man. When you're in a situation like that, you're scared. People are restless. So there's a situation where they have a helicopter. I don't know what happened. The helicopter was trying to film what was going on, and so I guess the when the helicopter came too low, the wind ended up blowing some of the debris and dirt, and people just panicked. And so there was almost a massive stampede that almost went down inside the convention center. So that's why we had to get out of there. So we was across the street. And again, it was at night. It was pitch dark. The police come rolling down the street. And I don't know what happened. They had a guy that was trying to flag down the police and was trying to get the police attention. And maybe I don't know, the police panicked and he shot the guy point blank range in the head. He was the guy was trying to approach the police car, and the police just fired and killed the guy right there on the spot. And almost caused another panic stampede. People that have medical supplies. So New Orleans, you got a lot of people that have diabetes issues, high blood pressure, and they don't have their medicine. There were
Right.
no medical treatments there whatsoever, even though they promised that. There was no water, there was no food, no kind of medical aid at all. They were just shipping. It was just like another. It felt like a concentration camp. I mean, even though obviously, I don't know what was that situation like in Germany, but if it was terrible, that would be a similar experience.
Right. Right.
You didn't know whether you're going to live or die the next day because I mean, you keep hearing, help is coming. You keep hearing all these conferences,
Right.
but no help
And
is coming
it didn't
whatsoever.
happen. I think it took a week. A week.
An entire
Right?
week, yes.
Even Cuba was offering to bring aid. Right.
Oh, that messed me up.
Yes, absolutely. Brother Jason is stating that the American sniper Chris Kyle was his name, actually bragged about, of course, coming to Katrina, coming to New Orleans, and of course shooting what they described as looters. He did make this claim, but there hasn't been any information to verify or substantiate that that's what happened. But he did make the claim that he and of course one of his compatriots traveled to New Orleans and set up shop and was shooting, of course, what they described to be looters. Once again, it's LaMumbaSpeaks.com. We're discussing the 17th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. As I mentioned, I actually read Michael Eric Dyson's book, Come Hell or High Water, Hurricane Katrina and the Color of Disaster. Great read if you want to actually read about what transpired and his views on the intersection of course, race and, of course, class. And what took place during Hurricane Katrina. Please check the book out. I'm not getting anything out of it, but I think it's a good read. I've read the book, so I would implore everyone to, if they could, check it out. Of course, we always believe in, of course, in intellectual development. So I'm always going to be throwing stuff at you all to read, just for the simple fact of, as I tell my children, reading, of course, is fundamental, right? Fundamental. Of course, promote critical thinking in our community, as we know. Unfortunately, oftentimes we find ourselves always falling for the proverbial banana in the tailpipe because we aren't critically engaging our minds the way that we should, developing that intellectual skill set. So with that being said, Brother Nate, I appreciate you coming on and discussing. If you don't mind sharing, how old were you when Hurricane Katrina hit?
I had to been about like 24.
Okay, so it's 7. So you're 41 now, then.
Well, yeah, yes. I had to been about 23, 24 between that round up and there. Okay. So yeah, I'm 40 right now, yes.
And so I can only imagine with you being there, right? And you growing up in New Orleans. So I mean, I'm sorry, Nolens. Did I say it right, Nolens?
Right? You said it fine. You good.
Okay. I'm just trying to hold it down. You know what I mean?
Nah, you good, bro.
Going to New Orleans, singing the culture, and of course, but I think one of the biggest things that I know for you, you probably were very hurt to see the destruction of your city.
Absolutely. Even to this day, the city is it's in horrible condition, bro. Like they still have areas, many areas that have not developed at all, man. So it's still a disaster still to this day. I mean, we've seen what happened last year with the hurricane, and it's they're still lacking resources out there.
Right.
It's still underdeveloped.
And why do you think that is the case?
I think that
you could be candid. You could be candid.
I think it's obvious that it's almost like it's almost like it's on purpose for them to keep it that way.
Okay.
I think the city is robbed. I think the people are completely robbed. There's no economic development in the city, and they're keeping it that way. And and every time I listen to the news coming out of there, everything they talk about, of course, the crime is real bad, but the only solution is to get more police. I mean, it's the same thing, with any major city, is just throwing more police. And I know that's not the solution at all. And they know that.
Right, and Malcolm X said many years ago that the black community is the only community where you have more police, yet more crime, right?
Absolutely.
And Malcolm said that the only way that this can happen is unless the police are in cahoots with the criminals. like literally.
Absolutely.
He said there's no way you can have more police, yet more crime. This is impossible. The police
It's
are
impossible.
in cahoots with the criminals, and we know that criminality in our community, unfortunately, has a domino effect, right? I always tell my children, everything you do has a domino effect. And in our community, as in every community, I don't know if you're familiar with the term broken windows theory, right? So it could start off as something as innocuous as a broken window. That would then lead to street level crime. Street level crime would then lead to what? Middle class flight. Middle class flight leads to businesses leaving. And before you know it, you have a city or an administrative area or municipality with a lower tax base.
Yeah.
Right? So as a result, now the children have to go to what? Underfunded schools that doesn't give them a competitive advantage in a global economy. So it has a domino effect, right? And so, of course, we all know that if you even go back to the era of COINTELPRO, right, which, if you want to be quite honest, wasn't long ago. Of course, we want to make sure, once again, that we're highlighting Chairman Fred Hampton. Today, of course, is his 74th birthday. But one of the things that would take place was they would want black people to be criminals so that they could put leverage on them to make sure to have them infiltrate a black liberation organization.
Yeah, even because I studied, well, I'm still studying Dr. Amos Wilson work. Actually,
Dr. Amos
actually,
Wilson.
because of Dr. Amos Wilson, just listening to his lectures online, I think the people that put that out there, man, that really opened up my eyes to what's really going on. And as he stated, that these institutions like the police departments, the state, by having the crime the way it is, it also validates the reason for the state. Absolutely. And the police departments.
That's right.
So it's like is the crime is there to for the police to maintain, huh?
Yeah, it's almost like in prophecy,
yeah. So it's as he stated, this is a crimogenic society, and I just see it completely, man. I mean, I try to talk to people, my family members, because I still got family members back out there, just try to enlighten them, to what's kind of happening. And one of the things that I kind of battle with some of my family members, friends, they just keep, it's just the constant thing that what they're saying, well, they just, they're committing crime because, they either, my dad, he'll say because they don't know Jesus, or, I have other relatives that say, well, they just like that, so they don't see the mechanisms happening, even with me trying to tell them, they just can't see it. They think it's just by some kind of personal choice that, they just like that, they want to commit crime. They don't want to, do the right thing. They, as far as what, how the state, the police departments, how it contributes to that, they can't see.
Right. And Brother Jason, I would love for you to come be part of the conversation, Brother Jason. But you just mentioned Eric Dyson said black people wouldn't support Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Jackson because we hate dark skin. And so one thing I want to say is I mentioned his book because it's a good read, right? I'm not concerned with his personal politics. We know oftentimes Eric Dyson says a lot without saying anything, right? But this isn't a situation where I'm trying to have a referendum on who he is as a person or his personal politics, and simply hiding his book because it is a high level, is a great read, high level scholarship about what took place during Hurricane Katrina, and of course the government's response or lack of response therewith. With that being said, his comment about her, well, I think one, we have to understand Eric Dyson typically says whatever he needs to make sure that he stays within stays in the news cycle, right? Second, I think it's also important that I would argue that part of the reason black people didn't support Sister Jackson is because one, her position on Lockheed Martin case, and then also the fact that she was married to a white guy, if you want to keep it a buck. What we have started to see is a lot of black people put in prominent positions, but they're not married to another black person. and so that we know that whatever resources are able to acquire is not going to benefit the Black community. And a good example would be in the case of the late great Kobe Bean Bryant, right? Many people argue that he's a top 5 player of all time. That is not unanimous, but there tends to be a consensus around that, right? And with that being said, most people don't know that, and we're kind of getting off into the weeds, but we're going to bring it back, Brother Nate. So please forgive me here.
No, you good, bro.
But many people don't know, and I was a huge Kobe fan. I mean, I think I had a man crush on Kobe at one time. Literally, I mean, when I played ball, I used to try to play exactly like him, shoot the same shots, dribble the way he did, everything, right? People used to call me Kobe at the gym. That's back when I was younger and I could jump out the gym, though, right? But ended up taking place was his parents cut him off. They wouldn't speak to him when he married a non-Black woman.
See, I didn't know that. I found that out afterwards. I had no idea.
Like, listen, we put all this money and resources in you becoming the best player in the country while you was in high school. We put all this money and resources and time and effort in to make you be what you are. And then you go and give it to a whole nother racial group of people. So his parents literally, they stopped speaking to him until the grandchildren were born. And that's how they end up reconnecting and having a relationship once again, was because they wanted to be part of their grandchildren's lives, like most grandparents would be.
Right.
So that's a major issue. And we're finding that a lot, seeing that a lot, to where a lot of Black people are being put in positions of prominence, but they are in interracial relationships. And Malcolm even stated this back in the 60s, that you would find that a lot of so-called Black leaders were going to the White House, going to Congress to speak on behalf of the so-called American Negro. But Malcolm said that all these individuals are in interracial relationships. So what they really are concerned with is what? White people accepting their interracial relationships, not, of course, the conditions of Black people as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say politically, and of course this is due to me being a Pan-Africanist, but politically, I don't take a Black person serious if they're in an interracial relationship. Doesn't mean that they're a bad person. Doesn't mean that they aren't a great professional. Doesn't mean that they don't have good morals or values. But I said from a political standpoint, I don't take them serious. And because we know that part of white supremacy is what the maldistribution of resources, right? This is part of white supremacy. You hoard the resources and you don't give others resources, right? And so what tends to take place is, unfortunately for many of our folk, because we got that itis, right? What tends to happen as soon as we get to a certain position and we get some resources, we got to go get one of them.
Yeah.
Right? We saw the situation with the sister who married Prince Harry, right? And oh my God, the family is racist. Well, they were colonialists, you dumb fuck. What did you think?
Yeah, that's just
right. And then the fact that you had all these Black women praising her. Oh, and Prince Harry, I didn't know he got swag. Like, man, you look like a loser.
Wow.
Literally. Oh, they had a gospel type wedding. What's your point? It's still white supremacy at the end of the day. The gospel wedding is symbolic. What's substantial is this is a white supremacist family, and they ain't gonna change for you. They ain't gonna change for your monkey ass. You're gonna have to deal with it. Get it how you live.
Look, can I ask you, how long have you been a Pan-African?
Well, I would say unofficially since I was a child, right? Because if you meet people that knew me in grade school, like, he was like that when we was kids, right? But I would say officially, when I actually knew what Pan-Africanism was, I actually knew the definition of what it was in the history of Pan-Africanism, going all the way, of course, to the Maroon societies in Brazil, Florida, Central America, to, of course, today. I would say I've been a Pan-Africanist for about 17 years.
Gotcha. And I guess I wanted to ask, like, when you, because I seen that the interview you did with that brother with explaining what Pan-Africanism was.
And we may disagree, but he's a strong brother, a powerful brother, right? And so I just want to put that out there. I brought him on the show because I believe that his heart is in the right place. So I just want to state that's why I brought him on the show.
Right. So when you're talking with people, like the average Black person about Pan-Africanism, and you're trying to explain the systems of white supremacy or white domination, however people want to call it.
Yes, sir.
When you explain it, it just, when you see they don't understand, like, how do you break it down where they can digest it.
Well, I think there's a couple things, right? And as I told the brother on the show, I don't have an issue if you're not a Pan-Africanist. Many people I work with, colleagues, even people I associate with, grew up with, even friends aren't Pan-Africanists. They may be Pan-Africanist sympathizers, right? They may sympathize with some of the issues and proponents of Pan-Africanism, but they aren't actually Pan-Africanists themselves. But what I tend to find what takes place, particularly nowadays with the FBA, ADOS communities, right? The Legion is that they're taking pot shots at Pan-Africanism. They're being critical of Pan-Africanism, which is something I don't have a problem with. But the critiques that they're giving of Pan-Africanism are categorically false, right? And I can state this because I'm a Pan-Africanist. My master's thesis was entitled, "Is Pan-Africanism Dead? Examining the efficacy of Garveyism in the age of globalism." And the fact I'm going to do is I'm going to actually pull up my thesis and put it in the chat so people can read it. Yes. So that you would see what your boy is talking about here, right? And so as a result, I tell people all the time, like, listen, if you want to critique Pan-Africanism, make sure that your critiques are factual. I have no problem with you critiquing Pan-Africanism, but just make sure the critiques are factual. I just put the link in the chat to my master's thesis, "Is Pan-Africanism Dead?"
Oh, okay, great.
The other issue is I'll try to explain to people that anti-Blackness is ubiquitous. It's global, it's omnipresent, right? Pan-Africanism doesn't argue that you need to put whatever issues that you're facing in your present location on the back burner for what? The liberation of Africa. That's not what Pan-Africanism advocates. What Pan-Africanism advocates is understanding that no matter where you are in the world, irrespective of where you are in the world, that the anti-Black racism, discrimination, violence, miseducation that you're facing is connected to a global system of anti-Blackness, right? So irrespective of you in Seattle, Washington, Bangor, Maine, Mexico City, Mexico, Sao Paulo, Brazil, Sydney, Australia, or London, England, right? It's connected. And that irrespective of where we are in the world, we should be working to what? Build political, social, and economic power to what? Be able to repel the insidious anti-Black lasers, right, that'll be thrown at us by what the dominant societies, right? And so, and the other thing I tell people is that the difference between Black nationalism and Pan-Africanism, as we all know, when Malcolm X traveled to Africa and came back home, he became a Pan-Africanist. Right? Black nationalism is advocating for the political, social, and economic empowerment of Black people in your country. Right? Pan-Africanism is advocating for the political, social, and economic empowerment of Black people globally.
So that kills, because sometimes I would hear some of the ADOS and the FBA, they'll say things like, well, why can't the the Pan-Africanists, if they love Africa so much, why they don't just go and move back to Africa?
Right. Well, one thing people have to understand is that being African-centered is a derivative of Pan-Africanism, right? But Pan-Africanism does not require that one repatriate to the continent. Now, has there been a line of thought in Pan-Africanism that promotes repatriation? Yes, you can look at that with Paul Kufi. You can look at that with Marcus Garvey. You can look at that with Martin Delaney, right? We know Patrice O'Neill, who was the head of the Black Panther Party in Kansas City, repatriated to Tanzania, right? We know Maya Angelou and many of her coterie of course, artists moved to Accra, Ghana, right? We know there were Black people who moved to Ethiopia, right? So we know that is people do repatriate. But what Pan-Africanism advocates is that irrespective of where you are in the world, just like Jewish Zionism to a certain extent, right? No matter where you are in the world, you need to be building institutions and starting and creating initiatives to help give your people a competitive advantage in a global economy.
Got you. Yeah. I mean, like I said, with myself, I'm, I would consider myself, new. I'm still learning. I don't want to assume anything. So I'm in my learning phase right now. I'm just taking in information and just reading books that I wish a lot of this stuff I knew, early on in life. But, like I said, it's never too late than never,
Absolutely right. You never, I can recall when I got my bachelor's degree. And my son said to me, I think he was 6 or 7 at the time. He said, "Well, Dad, just because you graduated doesn't mean you stop learning."
That's true.
So, the only time when your brain stops working is when I think you refuse to learn. So it's nothing wrong with that. But like I said, irrespective of where you are in the world, if you truly want to affect positive change for Black people, we have to build institutions to serve the needs of our community, so we're not dependent on the power structure for our needs. That's number one. And then number two, we need to be creating initiatives. And I can state this because this is something I've been doing for the past 17 years, right? We know that unfortunately, the majority of Black children receive what Dr. Carter G. Woodson stated almost 80 years ago, miseducation, right, in the school system. And so what did I do? I was part of an initiative that created a Juma Moshi Shule, which of course is Kiswahili for a Saturday school, where the children will be receive supplemental instruction. They would learn how to play chess, right? They would be learning African history, right? Mm-hmm. This was the West Dayton Youth Task Force. Everyone knows I'm from Dayton, Ohio. Shout out to the 937, right?
All right.
Homer Paulance Dunbar, the world's first world-renowned African-American poet and novelist, also wrote the song for Tuskegee University, and of course, home of the Wright brothers, who of course invented the airplane, invented flight. So with that being said, this is the work that has to be done, right? Building institutions, creating initiatives to help give our people a competitive advantage, right? Because the reality is, it's great for me to have a channel and I can disseminate information, but building institutions and creating initiatives is what is going to help us move forward. I can recall that when I went to New York City many years ago, I made up a story about doing a paper on Jewish cultural retention in America. And I found that the senior research project for students at these Hebrew schools, these Jewish schools, was to create a business and actually have revenue coming in for the business.
Really?
Yes, this is seniors in high school. But here's the biggest part. It wasn't just that. They also taught them, after they were able to create a business, have revenue coming in. Because a lot of people create businesses in the dorm room of their college dorm room, right? But what ended up happening, they would teach them how to create a nonprofit, and then funnel the profits from that business to a nonprofit organization so that they didn't have to pay taxes. So we're talking about not being ran by the world, but running the world.
Wow. That's amazing.
We're talking about, once again, a competitive advantage in a global economy.
Wow.
Yes, a competitive advantage in a global economy.
See, and I think if we had these institutions in place, we wouldn't have situations like Katrina would happen, where we, swap, just droves of Black people just stuck out, man. That,
yes, sir.
That affect me to this day is just seeing how helpless we really were.
And one of the things I do want to mention is that you saw the agency and resilience of the Black community, because you had Black people getting boats and going around rescuing people themselves.
Yeah, you had inner work. You had, I think, one of the Neville. I think it was one of the women of the Neville family. They were driving school buses, picking up people. So you had that. Yeah. It just, the thing is that the institutions is just I think that was the issue.
Yes, absolutely. I'm with you 100%. So of course, once again, here at Lumumba Speaks, we believe in gaining a competitive advantage by always betting on Black. We're having a conversation about remembering Hurricane Katrina. Of course, come hell or high water, the color of disaster in Hurricane Katrina. Make sure you hit that subscribe and the like button and the notification bell. I know a lot of you all be ghost watching. We're here with Brother Nate, who is a New Orleans, or like some like to say, a Nolans native, present, of course, in New Orleans. And actually lived through the terrifying experience of course, New Orleans being a city where many of us could call under siege after Hurricane Katrina made landfall 17 years ago yesterday.
Yeah, you're right. It was under siege again. Just seeing that contracting group out there. That it just, at the time, like I said, when I seen it,
Blackwater, right?
Yeah, like I said, when I seen them, I literally seen them after the rain stopped. I stepped outside, and I walked maybe like a couple of feet away from the senior place where I was at, because we was by my grandmother. That was kind of high ground. So I mean, we got water, but the way New Orleans is it's like a bowl, man. So you have certain parts of the city that just you know extremely lower than the other.
And then for
To the
that, yeah,
point,
yes, for many people who don't know, New Orleans is actually a city that is what 9 to 10 feet below sea level, right? And it's
yeah,
situated between two major bodies of water, the Mississippi River, and of course the Lake Pontchartrain, right? And for
that's correct. Yeah,
people that don't know, much of the swamplands south of New Orleans have eroded, right? And so the Gulf of
yeah,
Mexico has actually progressively come further north, closer to, of course, the city of New Orleans. And then, of
right.
course, you know that actually, when I was in the Navy, we actually took we went to New Orleans via the Mississippi River, went all the way up the Mississippi River, and then, of course, we docked in New Orleans for about a week and a half. And I was out there.
Oh, okay.
I didn't have any home training during, of course, Mardi Gras, right? I was drinking those hand grenades though, bro. Like they was off the chain, man. They sweet too. You just drink
You
them.
want to know some? You got a familiar face. Maybe I've probably seen you out there at some point. Who knows, man?
I was in the fish quarter heavy though. I ain't gonna lie, I was in there heavy. But yeah, so of course, do you believe that something like this could happen again?
Yeah. Just like I said, with the previous storm that happened in New Orleans, one of the issues was people didn't have access to generators, and even though they didn't have necessarily water damage, but you had overall structural damage was just completely crippled the people because they don't again when we don't these institutions, uh we're at a major disadvantage. I mean, these things are prone to happen when disaster happens. So it can happen anywhere. I mean, anywhere we have a large majority of our people, because we don't control these institutions, the end result is going to be the same.
Absolutely. And so I think that's very important that if we don't control their institutions, one of the things we used to do many years ago before integration was that we built parallel institutions to serve the needs
Right.
of our community, right? And so, as you know, there's an African proverb that states, talking doesn't fill a breadbasket. So to build institutions, that means you got to do like Rihanna did and work, right? And so you got to put the work in, and rather than looking to bloviate or grandstand and resort to histrionics to get attention. And in my experience, right, I unfortunately can say that most people are willing to talk a good game rather than actually work a good game, right? I can recall with many of the brothers and sisters that co-created the Coalition of African Unity back in my hometown of Dayton, Ohio, which was modeled after Malcolm X's Organization of African American Unity. And I would dare say that we probably had between 25 and 30 people at that initial meeting. But when it came down to actually getting the work done of wanting to better our community and restore our people to our traditional greatness and create initiatives to solve some of the problems that we felt were most pertinent in our community, we had about 9 people that consistently showed up. So we know that most people like to, as
Wow.
one of the esteemed elders I've ever met in my entire life, Larry Crow, always tells us most people want to bloviate and have indignation sessions where they can say the white man is this, the white man is it, right? He's a dog, he's a bear cat, he's all these things, but no one actually willing to do any work to actually solve the problems in our community, and that's a huge problem that we have. So I hope that going forward, that one of the things my channel can do, of course, is inspire, or maybe we could even have some online workshops in the coming months on how to create initiatives to actually solve some of the pertinent issues, of course, in our community.
I was going to ask. I don't know if you have, like, again, like I said again, I'm new to your channel. Do you do book reviews? Because I think just having a solid understanding on what basically like Pan Africanism,
Yes, sir.
just some understanding of political science, just how to even
Yes,
organize.
I'm gonna put a book in the chat. Right, it's one I had my son read when he was younger. And the title of the book is Pan-Africanism for Beginners. Right. And I think that's a great place to start.
Gotcha.
Actually, a picture of him holding the book on my Facebook page.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, because I think because again, I'm new. I purchased three of Dr. Amos Wilson books. So far, I have Blueprint for Black Power. That's
That's
one of
what
the
you
first
should.
books
That's right. And a matter of
I
fact,
purchased.
real quick, because I got it right here. Right there
Oh
we go.
wow.
Now you can see mine is about 10 years old, right?
Yeah,
And it's,
yeah.
and it's marked up. It's marked up
Wow.
with the subway in Harlem. But I always tell black
Wow.
people that if you're serious about being
Wow.
black and you're serious about life, this book right here should be your Bible, right? I tell people
Wow.
when you go to the Negro church, right? The pastor will tell you when all hell breaks loose, you should pull out your Bible, right? But I tell people, black folk, if you don't want hell to break loose, you better read this book and implement the initiatives that he, of course, is opining.
Wow. Yeah, I mean that book is packed with so much information. I mean, I have to, because again, I have to, I'm new. I'm considered new, even though I've been, listening to Dr. Amos Wilson for since 2018, round up in there.
Mm-hmm.
Just really hearing his work, so I consider myself new. Um, but yeah, just going over the book. I'm not finished, so I'm still reading through it.
I mean, yeah, it
Uh,
was like 1,000 pages. Yeah, but I would say this, brother. You stating that you're an infant or you're a novice, right? But
right.
I think, but you have been reading, you've been following the teachings of Dr. Amos Wilson. So what this means is it's time for you just to start putting in the work, brother. It's time for you to
Got
start putting in the work, right?
got
Absolutely. So wherever you are, it's time for you to connect with some like-minded brothers and sisters, right? And start putting in the work, building institutions, creating initiatives to what? Help our people gain a competitive advantage in a global economy. Because what it comes down to, we
absolutely.
have to compete. No matter where we are in the world, Budapest, Japan, Hungary, Turkey, we could be in Istanbul, Cairo, Cape
Yes,
Town,
sir.
right? Panama City, Panama, which I've been there, by the way. It's hot as hell, right?
Wow.
But it was good. I met a lot of Afro-Panamanians down there, right? And it was put me on game about what was taking place, right? We have to be building initiatives so that we could gain a competitive advantage in the global economy.
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Actually, this is my first. Well, yeah, this is really my first time getting on StreamYard and getting live and talking with
Yes, sir.
someone. So yeah, I just, I'm glad that you did this Katrina show. I really appreciate that. That's why I wanted to get on and just speak with you to give my perspective.
No
And
problem.
thank you for allowing me to come on here.
Well, absolutely. Well, our great ancestor, Queen Mother Fannie Lou Hamer, she taught us to never forget where we come from and always praise the bridge that carried us over. And of course, I wanted to honor the moral responsibility to remember. Right, we know we lost a lot of our brothers and sisters due to the lack of care and concern of course, the federal government. Malcolm always could say the government, not our government, right? Because if it was our government, it wouldn't treat us
Right.
so it's the government. I don't care who's in the White House. I don't care who's the vice president or who's the president. It's the government, not our government. And so, of course, at the time, as I stated, was in the, I didn't say this, but I was in the National Guard at the time. And my unit actually got deployed to Katrina. And so once again, being that close to the situation, I think I would be remiss in my duty, of course, if I did not come on. And of course, I just want to pay homage to the brothers and sisters who not only passed away, but also those who survived and endured, of course, what took place while they were living in an actual American city that was under siege, right? So with that being said, brother, I'm going to let you close, give some final thoughts, and then we're going to sign off for the evening.
All right. Yeah. No problem, man. But yeah, just going through that, it allowed me to really start seeing things for what it really is. I mean, because back in New Orleans, just I had a different mentality. It just party, having fun, which is nothing wrong with those
All right,
things.
504 boys, right?
Right.
Hey, it's all
Yes,
good,
sir.
man.
Yes, sir.
I know what it is. Listen, and this
Yes,
is
sir.
what I tell people. Even though at an early age I was always black-minded, there was a time in my life, and I tell people this when I go speak, particularly the young man, that I used to be a miscreant. People don't know this, but I spent 20 months of my life aggregate in a county jail.
Wow.
I've been arrested over 24 times. My
Wow.
children are like, there's no way you used to be like that. You're an academic, Dad. You're getting your PhD. I used to be like that long before you all were born.
Wow, that's amazing.
And part of
That's
that
amazing.
was because of course, I grew up. I always did well in school. I was extremely studious. I really didn't have a chance if I didn't get straight A's. My parents whooped my ass and shit. I mean, this shit really happened.
Right.
Like I got C and I got my ass beat. Like what the fuck? I mean, shut up. Like true story. I told my daughter that she was like, "You got a whooping for getting a C?" I said, "Yeah." And they was like, "Well, you bullshit. You ain't never got a C before, so you must be bullshitting. So where's my belt?" You know, your parents be like, "Go get my belt." You be like, "I can't find it." Like, you know what I'm saying? You ain't trying to hide that motherfucker. You know what I'm saying?
You don't. Hey, look, you don't want them to find nothing. So
what ended up happening was, unfortunately, of course, I was National Junior Honor Society. I was Who's Who America's Top High School Students. By the time I got to college, by the time I got to high school, it was like you just party and bullshit. You just show up, have a good time, and flirt with the fine ass girls, right? And so I ended up in a healthy concept of what it meant to be black. And that concept was based off everything I saw on TV, particularly the channel TV. Fortunate. And so what ends up taking place was I joined the Navy, got kicked out of the Navy in less than a year. Came home. My parents like, "What the hell are you doing here?" Well, you can't stay here because you want to go out being miscreant. And so, of course, I got into some trouble. But luckily, out of all the times I was ever arrested, I only had one conviction, and that was for a misdemeanor. And so, even though I was engaging in, of course, nefarious activities, I always knew one of the things that my uncle told me is that the only way you could catch a fish is if it opens his mouth. So I would get arrested. I would just never say a word. Fine, just go to court. Because, sometimes, the case is circumstantial. I remember sometimes they're like, "Well, we're taking it to trial with circumstantial evidence." And I'm like, "Okay, let's go." And we'd be in there, and the judge would be like, "There's not enough evidence. I got to dismiss the case."
You already knew what it was.
Yeah, I just knew to shut the hell up. Like, so sometimes, as my grandfather would say, never pass up a good opportunity to shut your effing mouth.
Man. Yeah. Wow. I think that was taught, just universally, man. We wouldn't. I'm not saying we still wouldn't have police violence, but some of the stuff I think, like my mother always said. Sometimes,
trying to say.
Yeah. Yes.
I think what you're trying to say is that sometimes, like I would agree. The police are going to be police because we know the historical relationship that we've had with police genocide in America, that irrespective of how we act, this is how they're going to pop off. We know this. But I think what you're also saying is that sometimes, unfortunately, and we got to be honest with ourselves, we sometimes engage in behaviors that almost give them to the free pass to do this because we're being unnecessarily difficult to deal with.
Absolutely, yeah. You definitely see that. Yes.
Now, on the flip side, people say, "Well, white folk get to do all that shit all the time, and they don't get harassed and pulled over and beaten by the police the whole nine," right? And as one of my mentors would say, "You ain't white." Right? And I had to tell my son, we were talking, and he was like, "Well, you know how some women, they could go off and no one says a word." I'm like, "Right, but you're not a woman."
Right.
You're 15 years old and you're 6'2".
Right.
So you're gonna be a big guy. You have to control yourself, right?
Right.
So I can get where you're coming from. It's a hard conversation to have because it's almost sounds because people would take it as it sounds like you're blaming the victim.
Yeah. That's why
should an unarmed citizen be brutally shot or beaten by the police? And no should an unarmed citizen be physically assaulted by a police officer beyond arresting you.
Yeah, because I think you can get accused of respectable politics and things of that nature.
Right.
Yeah, so it just but at the same time I still think you have to have some level of self-examination too. You know,
Absolutely, absolutely. As a matter of fact, I celebrate Kwanzaa, right? I don't know if you do or not, but I've always celebrated Kwanzaa with my
no, I
children.
have never celebrated it.
We've never done Christmas. Matter of fact, we might do a live Kwanzaa from our home on StreamYard, just for everyone, right? But one of the things that the third principle of Kwanzaa is, it teaches us what Ujima, collective work and responsibility, to make our brothers and sisters' problems all problems and solve them together. It also teaches us that if you're going to believe in this concept of collective work and responsibility, you have to engage in what? Self-reflection, right? To make sure that you're not going out actively causing problems and then running to people in the neighborhood saying, come help me out, because you can't control yourself.
Right.
And that's what happened. It got to the point was I kept getting arrested. And then people said, man, I'm tired of having to run around and then get the money to bail you out.
Right.
Literally, like, dude, this shit is getting old. I mean, this is literally what happened. I had one of my homeboys like, dude, this shit is getting old.
Wow. Yeah, you're right.
That's part of it. And even I'm not Fred Hampton, but because I'm thinking of Black Panther Party, but Huey P. Newton, and please forgive me, I would be remiss in my duty if I didn't state his name correctly. Dr. Huey P. Newton, founder of the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. Many people don't know that he had a PhD. But one of the things that he stated was that, and he mentioned this in his memoir, Revolutionary Suicide, right? I told you I'm a railroad brother, railroad. And I actually read his memoir, Revolutionary Suicide, and during Kwanzaa of 2009. Boy, I got a memory like a steel trap, boy. I'm trying to tell you.
Yeah, I see you and Diallo, man. Y'all are sharp, bro. Like, I had no idea they had brothers as sharp as y'all, man. I mean, yeah.
I appreciate that. And one of the things he mentions is that if the police are going to arrest you, nothing that you say is going to get you out of being arrested. So he states, just shut up, get transported to the jail, and make sure you can make a phone call to a lawyer or someone to pay your bond. So matter of fact, the last time I got arrested was like 5 years ago. And this was something I actually didn't do. Like, I didn't do anything wrong when I got arrested. So I knew, and I work out a lot. I'm like 6 foot, 222. I bench like 385, 390. So I could tell how the police were looking at me. They showed up, they was like 8 deep. So I'm like, okay, they think I'm about to spaz out. So I just chilled out because all I had on was like a shirt and some shorts. So I'm like, all right, cool, I ain't gonna trip. I was mad though, right? I was pissed off. Matter of fact, it was the day of the solar eclipse. So I missed the whole damn solar eclipse. I mean, this is bullshit. You know what I'm saying? So I was mad. So long story short, I get arrested. So I already knew. I'm like, all right, they're gonna arrest me. I took out a pen, wrote down some people's phone number, put it in my underwear, and so I come on, man, get me downtown. You get me downtown, I called my uncle, hey, I got arrested on some bullshit. Can you come down here, post my bond? Cool. He came down there, 90 minutes later, posted my bond, I was out. 6 months later, we take the case to trial, I'm acquitted. That simple.
Do you think that needs to be taught, like, just how to,
Absolutely.
and again, I'm not, and I know it just sounds like I'm just excusing the police, but like how to just even engage with them.
No, because this is what's going to happen. So, and here's the thing, I was completely innocent for what I was arrested for. And that came out during the trial because the jury deliberated 5 minutes, literally deliberated 5 minutes. This is not hyperbole, right? I'm not bloviating here. And even the foreman was like, why did this case even come to trial? The foreman of the jury was like, why did this case even come to trial? But here's the biggest issue. One of the questions that was asked was, how did he respond when you told him he was under arrest? So here's the thing. If they tell you you're under arrest and you ain't gonna arrest me, you just defied a lawful order. Now you're resisting arrest. That's an extra charge. So now your bond is going to be even higher, right? And now, because you're resisting arrest, it's going to look like what? Well, if he was innocent, why would he act like that?
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? And so that's why no matter if I'm right or wrong, guilty, innocent, okay, fine. Let's go. And then I just call somebody and get up out of here.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So sometimes we have to think, and we have to think about the end game, right? Not just the present, but the end game. And I think, unfortunately, that is why oftentimes we find these situations. I mean, mind you, on the inside, I was living. I was here. When I was downtown, and I'm in the county, and this young cat was like, man, I see you be working out a lot. Y'all can tell by your physique. man, I've been in here like 6 months. I've been trying to get it in with the push-ups and calisthenics and da-da-da-da-da. And he was like, and mind you, I'm livid, bro. Like, I'm like burning. And he's like, man, I'm in here for selling fentanyl. And I was like, I don't like drug dealers, so you should get away from me. And he like just looked and was, got up and drove. So I mean, I was like, I could have punched through a damn steel door. That's how livid. That's how pissed off I was.
Right.
But I knew, listen, if you do, what's going to happen is what? Well, you said, didn't the SC just something about Miranda rights? Yeah, I heard something about that they're talking about taking away people's Miranda rights, which means that we have to be even more vigilant of making sure we comport ourselves in a manner, not that is in their benefit, but that's in our benefit. And as I stated, my uncle taught us what? The only way you could catch a fish is if it opens its mouth. What does that mean? Shut the French toast up.
Yeah, because I think from what I'm seeing, I don't think we really, as a people, understand that we're in the state of war.
Yeah, we're behind enemy lines, absolutely.
Right. So I don't think, just like you said, just when the police shows up, you just go, ham. I mean, because you got to look at it. They got a gun and a force. Right. So you have to learn how to pick your battles.
Absolutely.
And the whole goal, I think, should be, live the day so we can fight another day.
Yeah, absolutely. Even Bob Marley was on say, "He who fights and runs away lives to fight another day."
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
So one of the brothers he asked a question. When was the last time you were in New Orleans or Nolens? I'm sorry, Nolens and right? And when do you plan on returning?
It's been years, man. I haven't been back in years. Usually, my family come up because I'm in Austin, Texas, so they come up to Austin and visit me. Okay. Am I planning on going back? From what I've been seeing, and I had a friend of mine that went back, and he begged me not to go back. So I don't think I'm going back anytime soon. Unless if I go out there to really do some work. So which I would love to do that one day. Right. I mean, time is time and things is willing.
Absolutely. And I would say this, you don't have to wait to going back to New Orleans, right? The reality is, Paul Robeson said many years ago, the battlefield is everywhere.
You're right.
There is no shelter here, right? So the brother says we're never going to be safe in this country. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. No, we're never going to be safe in this country. That is correct. Marcus, one of the reasons Marcus Garvey was a huge proponent of what? Repatriation was because he said, man, we ain't never going to be safe here. We got to get the fuck out of here. He was like, we got to go because it ain't never going to be right in this motherfucker. Ever. And here's the reality of the situation. When we talk about white supremacist culture, white supremacist ideology, one thing, if we look at what took place in South Africa, F.W. de Klerk stated, hey, we ain't stupid. We're not going to negotiate ourselves out of power. One thing that they will never do is negotiate themselves out of positions of power. That won't happen.
Yeah.
Irrespective if they are no longer the numerical majority, they understand. Oh, I'm sorry, you said you're a sister. Hey, my bad, sister. Matter of fact, how about you join the conversation, right? So, thank you for correcting me, and you could correct me via video as well, right? But as a result, unfortunately, they understood that, right? And so we know even in South Africa, many of our brothers and sisters who were living under apartheid, which of course is the South African version of Jim Crowism, have stated that things haven't changed socially, politically, or financially, right? And as well as socially in South Africa. We know that there's no way that a man spends 27 years in prison. But they come in, sister, but join part of the conversation. I can answer that question. But there's no way a man can spend 27 years in prison, become president of a nation, unless it's a script and the plan behind the scenes to remove what of course was those financial barriers, sanctions that were going against the Oppenheimers and the De Beers. And we know we can't mention Nelson Mandela without, of course, mentioning Winnie Mandela, right? And so that, of course, is an issue. But no, so I would say argue that the solution, of course, is Black power, and that we have. And so one of the examples I give, colorful examples I give, and Brother Nate, I don't know if you're familiar with boxing.
Well, I watch boxing. I don't. I haven't boxed.
Very good. So you know that in a boxing match, if you keep getting hit by the same punch over and over and over again, does it mean that your opponent is great, or does it mean that you are incompetent?
Could be you're incompetent. I mean, keep getting hit by the same punch over and over.
Over and over. And this is what's happening to the Black community. So what does that mean? Because sometimes when we're talking about having agency, being self-determining, really believing in the Black radical tradition of audacious self-assertion, then one of the things we sometimes have to state is we have to look at, sometimes it's not what they're doing, it's what we're not doing that is the issue, right? And so as a result, sometimes it's what? Our incompetence, Ashe, that is leading to us being in the positions that we are in. Sometimes it's the fact that, unfortunately, there are many people in our community that view being educated as acting white. That is part of the issue. Sometimes it's an issue where we have young men and young women who do not have realistic life goals. The young man is 5'6" and he states he wants to go to the NBA, right? So sometimes, right, it's what we are not doing, not what they are doing, that of course is hindering Black progress. Sister, go ahead.
Well, I mean, you gonna answer my question?
I did. I believe the solution is Black power.
Say it again. I'm sorry.
I believe that the solution is Black power. That we have to build the political, economic, and military strength globally, so that when, of course, anti-Blackness is being disseminated upon us, we have the ability to repel it. And I would give an example. The same way that Ethiopia was able to be recognized globally as a sovereign nation because they were able to repair the Italians during the first Abyssinian Italian War. The same way that even though China at one point was under the heel of the British Empire, right? British colonialism, they had the Opium Wars and so on and so forth. But we know that over a decade ago, China christened their first aircraft carrier. So not only do they have economic power and political power, they also have military power, right? So
right.
We have to it's the focus is we have to gain power. And one of the things that Dr. Amos Wilson speaks about in his seminal text, Blueprint for Black Power, that Brother Nate has, is that he says that all of the issues that we find, the vicissitudes of anti-Blackness that we find ourselves having to deal with globally is due to our collective political, economic, and military powerlessness.
Now, is obtaining that level of power possible without some kind of revolution, some kind of, for lack of a better term, war, fight, revolution?
No, and I would tell you
bloodletting. Let me say that.
I get where you're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
I would tell you, this is why I would say no. It may come to that, but the first revolution has to be a revolution of the mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Malcolm X said that there had to be a cultural revolution before a political one, right? And so we know, unfortunately, many of our people have a extremely pro-white, anti-Black disposition. This has been proven, of course, by the Harvard implicit bias test, where 75% of Black people in America that took the Harvard implicit bias test had a pro-white, anti-Black disposition. We saw the same thing in the 1950s when Dr. Kimmeth and Mamie Clark had a doll test. The doll test was recreated, back in, I believe, 2005 in Harlem, New York, with the same results, right? And so the first revolution has to be a revolution of the mind. It has to be cultural, then political, because what we don't want is to have Mr. and Miss Negro running around with AK-47s talking about no justice, no peace.
Oh, that first test you mentioned, what was that called? The Harvard?
Yes.
What is it?
Harvard implicit bias test. Implicit bias test.
Gotcha.
Yes, sir.
So, at what point do they co-opt with stuff like COINTEL and I mean, I don't. Maybe today I'm pessimistic.
Yes,
You
ma'am.
know what I mean? I kind of go up and down with it.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if it's possible today
Yes, ma'am.
without some kind of, like you said, they're not going to just give up power. So even if we're building the type of power you're talking about, the cultural, mental, and even political,
Yes, ma'am.
at some
And
point they
economic.
always co-opt. They always co-opt.
Well, and part of the reason is because, unfortunately, we always end up getting an offer that is too good to turn down.
Is an issue, but no. So I would say argue that the solution. Of
I'm sorry. I'm trying. Okay.
And so what?
Say that again.
I think you got me on the background.
I'm sorry. I turned it down. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Say that again.
So, well, I think part of the issue is that when you talk about co-opting, is that we tend to always find an offer that is too good to pass up, right? Right. So that's part of the issue. I mean, if you look at many of the Black record labels, at some point,
right,
selling themselves to what the label to the majors.
Mm-hmm.
You look at Sean Puffy Combs and Bad Boy. You look at Jay-Z and Rockefeller, right? And so that's part of the issue, right? That we don't value or truly understand on a macro level the importance of ownership. If you look at Harlem, which of course is the most iconic and famous Black neighborhood in America, if you go there now, it's being called North Manhattan. If you go there, there's a lobster. Right? And a lot of that is due to the fact
it's not even recognizable.
And part of that is due to the fact that, of course, many of the Black people didn't own the buildings in Harlem. And I've been able to have conversations with even some Black business owners in my hometown in Dayton, Ohio. Once again, shout out to the 937 West Dayton Strong. But what ended up taking place was there was a sister who had an African clothing store. And I would actually go there, really every time I had a paycheck, I was in there purchasing something, right? And what ended up taking place was after 15, 17, 20 years of operating her business, the owner of the building said, "Hey, I don't want you here anymore. You got to go." Right. And so many people came out, they felt sad for her, so on and so forth. And what she told me, she said, "This is really my fault." I said, "What do you mean, mother? She was a queen mother." She said, "I could have owned this building 30 years ago, but I didn't."
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And she said something was wrong with the roof. I could have just put a tarp over it and paid someone to fix it. But I had an offer on the table 30 years ago to own this building. She says, not only that, I could have still had my business, but I also could have had residual income coming from all the tenants in the building.
Do you think that's the same thing with because I know there's been talk about the history of hip hop, but do you think there's an issue too with hip hop? There was no it seemed to be no ownership of hip hop.
That's the major issue. So we know, of course, hip hop started 49 years ago on August 11, 1973, when DJ Kool Herc had a back to school block party in the South Bronx, right? And so as a result, for many record executives at the time, hip hop was seen as a fad, right? It wasn't something that they believed would be financially lucrative. And of course, we do know that at the time when hip hop started, hip hop focused on what? Lyricism. It focused on what? Being African-centered. There were remnants of Black nationalism. And of course, being educated and trying to better your community, right? So white folk wasn't concerned with that. However, when they saw how financially lucrative hip hop was, particularly when you look at the Run DMC, when you look at LL Cool J, so on and so forth, KRS-One, right? Knowledge Reigns Supreme, right? They took advantage of that, and then as a result, in 3 years, you went from Fight the Power to Gin and Juice. And before you know it, particularly the image of Black women changed from one that was UNITY, who you calling to be, where Black women were educated, African-centered, to what? Next thing you know, they ain't had no damn clothes on, like a damn stripper. So everything. People talk about gatekeeping the cost. You can't gatekeep anything if you don't own anything. I just got to keep it a buck. If you're going to gatekeep, you got to control something. You control through ownership. Yeah.
Wow.
How do we get there?
Well, one, I think we have to be financially literate, right? I think second, we have to create a culture, particularly in the household. You know, the African proverb states that the ruin of a nation begins in the homes of its people. And we know that children are actors. They emulate what they see in them, right? So we have to create a culture in the household in which ownership is important. And I would say this because I have been part of a number of initiatives in which I've worked with young people. And we will disseminate these ideas to these kids, particularly in summer camps. When they come home, the parents are like, what? I didn't teach you that. Where'd you get that from? Or as Brother Nate stated, sometimes it's, well, if it ain't got nothing to do with Jesus, then I don't want my kids being part of it. Literally, I mean, I've experienced this in my life. Well, then y'all ain't preaching Jesus.
Right.
Jesus is going to handle it. So we ain't got to be doing all this financial literacy and learning about how to start a business because Jesus is going to take care of it. This is a hyperbole. I'm not resorting to histrionics. These are things I've actually experienced.
Yes, my aunt says it all the time. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
You know, I have a quick question. I think, you know, because I'm listening to. I'm not sure your name is
It's Jatan.
Jatan. Okay, got you. Yeah, I was listening to what you're saying. Like, how do we get there? And I think, well, my question would be is like, what do you think that Black people as a collective, are we ripe for a revolution? I think that would have to be you know, just to kind of get the temperament of the people.
Yeah, that's a good question. Good question.
You know, because I think even trying to, you know, interject any kind of revolutionary ideas, if that's not, you know, if the people is not right for that, I mean.
Well, I mean, if it's a Jesus revolution, I'm all down for it.
Amen.
There got to be a Jesus revolution first, brother. You're leaving out the most important point. There got to be a Jesus revolution.
Yeah, okay. All right.
If it ain't a Jesus revolution, it ain't going to work, brother, I'm telling you.
So, I mean, okay, so maybe, you know, what we could start with the cultural revolution, and I don't know what that looks like. You know what I mean? Does it look like the Black Power movement in the 60s and 70s? I don't know.
Right.
And that was what happened with that.
Well, what happened with that was COINTELPRO.
Right, there you go. Another co-op.
Right. So, but if you want to do that, it starts twofold. You got to build institutions, and you have to create initiatives. Right. When we talk about one of the reasons why America was founded as a white supremacist nation, based on genocide of Native American settler colonialism, of course, the racist chattel enslavement. One of the reasons why America still is based on those principles is because those principles were institutionalized via law, via educational institutions, societal institutions.
Right.
These things were institutionalized. So we have to build institutions. And I'm not talking about the Black church. And when I say the Black church, I'm talking about the Christian
church. The Black church has been co-opted.
Exactly. Because we're talking about when you talk about faith-based initiative, I'm calling it FBI.
Right.
Faith-based initiative, FBI. Faith-based initiative, FBI. Let's keep it a buck here. We know that at one point in the Black America, the nexus, the center of Black community building, of Black revolution started in the Black church. It was the community center. If you needed a job, you went to the community center. If you needed childcare, you went to the community. You went to the Black church. If you needed a food pantry, you needed food. If you needed clothes for a job interview, you went to the Black church. If we were going to plan how we was going to fight against segregation and this, that, and the third, you went to the Black church. Now, faith-based initiative equals FBI. They gave those Uncle Tom Handkerchief heads some money. And now
it's about prosperity, a prosperity ministry. Right. And Jesus, I don't know the Jesus they worshiping. The Jesus they worshiping would have turned the tables over.
Well, you know, and that's part of the issue. Oftentimes, people tend to what? Most people who are Christians, they identify with the meek Jesus, right? Because there are just as many scriptures, of course, in the Bible. And I'm not a Christian; I'm an atheist,
Right?
But I minored in religion when I was in undergrad, so I'm well versed, of course, with Christianity. My parents are actually ministers, and so there are many scriptures where Jesus is talking about using revolutionary violence.
Right.
He is as talking about as he is when he talks about turning the other cheek, right? And the meek shall inherit the earth, right? So the reality of the situation is that is, to me, is just a excuse for cowardice.
Wow.
That's just in my opinion. But the basis of it all comes back to building institutions and then, of course, creating initiatives, right? So, and the institutions are important because that's the way that you can what? You could create a mindset that will last more than one generation.
Okay, so how do you relate? And this is always my question. How do you relay that? Because we kind of talking to the choir.
Yes, ma'am.
You know what I mean? How do you relay that to the dude on the corner?
Well, this is, and you know what? I want to say, you asking some great questions, sister. I love you right now. For real. I don't even know you, but I'm giving you positive energy through the screen, right?
Okay.
So this is what I always tell people. And I'm going to give you an example. I don't know what your religious affiliation is, but have you ever came in contact?
I have none.
Okay, well, even better. This is a great analogy. So let's say you were in a situation where you're struggling, you don't have a job, and you need help fixing your resume, spoofing up your resume, cleaning up your resume, so that you can jobs. And you meet, have you ever been in a situation like that and you meet a person who's a Christian, instead of helping you solve your problem, they want to tell you about Jesus? Yeah. Right. So the same thing for Black folk who are Black-minded and want to empower the Black community and help restore Black people to our tradition. Right. Okay. Really want to what? Help people. What you should do, as some scholars who argue that Jesus' teachings were revolutionary, what do they say? They say one of the things Jesus taught was to treat people's needs as holy. So typically what happens is if you address the person's issue at hand, that would make them then start to ask questions. Well, who are you and what are you about? You help me with this for really no reason at all. You help me with my resume. You help me with class. What are you about? Well, brother, I'm a Pan-Africanist, so I'm Black-minded, and I just want to see Black people. Boom. Because what happens is we would then associate them helping you with whatever political ideology they have. Wow. Yeah. And I give another example. There's a brother. He's a Black guy. He was from The Other Westmore. He wrote a book called The Other Westmore about two Black men in Baltimore. Grew up. I think I have that book. Yes, and one went to John Hopkins. The other ended up getting life in prison. And they had the same name, grew up in the same zip code. But what he argues is that one of the reasons that he joined the military is that all the people who looked up to happened to be military men. So he associated one with the other. Responsible, masculine Black men, they're in the military. Well, shit, I guess the military helps you be that, so I'm going to join the military. I mean, Black brother or sister, and they about their life, and they're serious about life and serious about being Black, and they have a family, they have a career. Well, shit, well, maybe I associate that with being Black-minded, so I'm going to be it too. So what we have to do is treat people's needs as holy. And I'm going to give you another example. I dated this sister from South Sudan like 10 years ago. She was a baddie too. Woo, right?
Hey, bro, this is the fourth live stream I heard you mention. She really was bad, bro.
No. She's a model now. So long story short, she was like, well, listen, I want you to go to this wedding with me. And it was in Pittsburgh. So we drove all the way to Pittsburgh, right? So we get to the wedding. It's someone from Sudan. They singing, it's in a white church, they singing, I love you, Jesus, and Keith Swahili. I'm like, what the fuck is this, right? I'm like, man, I better get some cookies after this, right? You know what I'm saying? Long story short, I'm like, hey, I gotta go to the bathroom. So she's like, they showed me where the bathroom is. So I'm walking down the vestibule to get to the bathroom, and I see a table with nothing but pamphlets of all the services this white church was offering these Black African immigrants. No wonder they got them in here singing the white Jesus. Look at everything that they're doing for them. That's a great example. Needs as holy.
That's a good example.
That's why they were singing the white Jesus. So we want black people to sing the blue, black, purple Jesus, right? If we want black people to be about that life, we have to treat their needs as holy. And the only way you can do that is building institutions and creating initiatives.
What's
Now,
black-minded?
I used to be, I grew up in the church, and I started
So did I.
following the Hebrew Israelites, actually.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that's a whole nother issue.
Yeah.
But what I've seen in the community is that the church I was attending, they didn't necessarily, certain people they help with their needs, but not everybody.
Mhm.
But one thing they did offer a building and a place you can come to. So if you have any kind of issues, I think they offer some kind of social support. So
Right.
when people are going, because I remember the time my mother, when she first got diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, that's one of the first things she did. She ran to church, and church offered, so in exchange, church
That's a
offered
great point.
moral support.
Absolutely, that's a great point because it's a brick and mortar. There's an actual building there you can go to. It's
Right.
not an online community. That's a brick and mortar institution to see people.
Right.
Absolutely. That's why I said building institutions is so important. One of the reasons why Pan-Africanism is on life support is because there aren't any Pan-Africanist institutions.
Yeah.
Where they at? They
So
don't
since you've been
by and large.
So since you've been a Pan-Africanist, and I'm from what I'm understanding, you seem like you really been around. Why do you think they don't build, even small institutions?
Well, one, because it actually takes work.
Because of what?
Most of us, we have to give the gab. We like to bloviate with the best of them, right? But when you talk about building an institution, one, you got to put up some money, right? So that means what? You're going to have to be fiscally responsible, right? Another issue is that when you build an institution, that takes a certain level of commitment.
Yeah.
Right? So
it's sacrifice.
You can't build an institution that's based on emotional fervor.
Like Black Lives Matter.
Yeah. So that's an issue because, for example, and this is one of the things that Dr. Amos Wilson mentions in one of his books is that I think even Blueprint for Black Power, that Black people tend to be nationalistic as a community when something bad happens.
Right.
Like, oh, now we all see how they doing us. We got to get together. Da, 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 da. Then a month later, we're right back to being apolitical.
Wow.
Yeah. Something else happened. Oh, you see how they doing us? Hell no, we won't go. George Floyd. We need to put hands in them like we do for Macarena and shit, right? 2 months later, oh shit, I think LeBron's better than Jordan. Fuck you.
Yeah. Like black celebrities ain't black until they go into the Gucci store and the Gucci people
can't buy a $10,000 pair of shoes.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
See how they doing us? Uh-huh.
Do you think too, being a Pan-Africanist, and you think maybe like a sense of frustration just seeing the state of the people is maybe why these things don't happen either, like these institutions? Maybe they just see, what's the point if they, the masses are worried about what Kim Kardashian or whoever is wearing what, and they don't necessarily have the support of the people. Do you think that could be it too?
I think that collectively y'all people are asleep, right? And I've always made the argument, and I'm actually working on writing a paper on this, right? Talking about Black America's political slumber, right? And what I've stated, I know it's a good title, ain't it? I'll be cooking over here, okay?
Wow. Yeah, that's a good title. That's a good title.
And one of the things I argue is that Black America's political slumber came at the intersection of three pivotal events, three things in the 1960s. The liberalization of Black community values and the breakdown of the Black family.
So what do you think
Wait a minute,
broke
you
down the
said
Black
three
family?
things. Say the three things again.
Yes. So the first is integration.
Mm-hmm.
Second is the liberalization of
Okay.
community values. And the third is the breakdown of the Black family unit.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I've heard that as far as the breakdown of the Black family, I've heard people mention that one of the contributors to the breakdown is the welfare state. Do you? I mean, the government giving subsidies while at the same time, having certain stipulations to break up family. Do you think that's one of the? Is that what you're referring to?
Absolutely. That's why I mentioned the breakdown of the Black family unit, because we know that before LBJ's, Lyndon Baines Johnson's welfare reform in the 1960s, what took place before then, it was called relief, right? And there weren't any stipulations to where, the man couldn't be in home to get relief. But what did take place, unfortunately, was afterwards in the Black community, they would send caseworkers out. If there was any evidence of a man being in the home, then guess what would happen? You would lose your benefits. And there was actually a movie made about this in 1974, starring the late, great, vivacious, multi-talented actress
Diane Carroll
and Queen Mother. That's right, Diane Carroll. What did she say? The legs are the last thing to go, right? Hallelujah for Diane Carroll, right? And also starred, of course, James Earl Jones. And they talked highlighted this issue in the Black community.
So that you mentioned that, and this is what what I have to ask now with a follow-up question. So if it's the welfare state, because that's the argument that I hear. Well, the welfare state broke up the Black family, but that was to assume that Black people had to been in a better state for them not to be on welfare. So what was going on? What about?
And I would disagree, right? Because one, we know that, of course, during the New Deal, most American families were impoverished, even though they were together, intact, two-parent households, right? So after World War II, we know that because of the lack of competition in the global economy, particularly Western Europe being decimated by the war, that America became the preeminent superpower in the world, right? That was only challenged by the Soviet Union, right? And we know Russia, of course, is a derivative of the USSR. However, after World War II, you had GIs coming back home. They were able to get these GI Bill loan, VA loans, and build families, suburbs, so on and so forth. So they live high off the hog. However, there's a great book entitled "When Affirmative Action Was White" that highlights how these government benefits for veterans were disseminated not at the federal level, but at the local level, and only given to white families.
Right.
GI.
Color of Law is a good book about that too.
Right. And so as a result, what happened was Black people were still living in poverty.
Oh, what about deindustrialization? Did that have also?
Deindustrialization played a big role as well. So after the civil rights Black Power movement, and they said, well, fine, you Negroes want to rise up, but we just take all of the factories out of the inner city and ship them off not only to the suburbs, but to developing nations as well.
Let me say this. Let me say this real quick, because I think as a collective, we don't, this country, but I'm only concerned about Black people. Mm-hmm. As a collective, we don't really appreciate the impact and the legacy of our enslavement. I think most people think, okay, we free now. And some of us get shot, you unarmed, we get shot, and there's some bad stuff, but we free now. And so, I think a
Yeah,
lot of
that's a
us,
great point. Great point.
a lot of us expect us to be in it somehow at a place where, without even factoring enslaved 250 years of enslavement. I think we're doing, because all things considered, all things considered, we're doing well.
Well, and so I think there's another caveat as well, right? And I always tell people this, particularly when we have a conversation about advocating for reparations. That reparations isn't just for what the 244 years of chattel enslavement,
Mm-hmm.
but for what Michelle Alexander talks about in her book, The New Jim Crow, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everyone should read. That it was due to what us living under a system of social control,
Right,
with chattel enslavement, transformed into sharecropping,
right,
into black codes, and then transformed once again into what? Jim Crowism.
right.
Right. And so we've been living under a system of social control, in which we've been second-class citizens for what? For over 300 plus years.
And
so,
most of us don't want to admit that.
Right. And so she argues that that is what would be the harbinger of the fight and rightful quest for soliciting, of course, reparations from the government.
I know you mentioned that, I know you just said that we don't want to admit that. Do you also think that maybe because they, the mechanisms is, they don't have particular characters. Like I heard this guy coined the term, I think his name is Johann Galtung. It's called structural violence. And the problem with structural violence, they don't have particular characters, but the characters are more in a network. So do you think maybe that we just don't see the mechanisms that's honestly happening?
Absolutely. Real quick, once again, everybody, if you're watching, make sure you hit the subscribe and like button, as well as the notification chat, as well as the notification bell. We're here at Levees Speaks, where we believe in getting a competitive advantage, but always betting on black. So to answer your question, have you ever seen the movie Independence Day? Came out of 90s.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You remember, that's one of my favorite movies, actually. I watched it with my daughter.
Really?
Yeah, actually, yeah, it was one of my favorite movies. But I'm gonna tell you why.
That's corny. That's corny.
That's
corny.
Hey, I gotta be me, though. I gotta be me, right? So
Nah, you good, bro.
And she even admitted it was a good movie. She don't like nothing that I like, right?
Okay.
But so remember, there was a scene in the movie where the Jewish guy was like, it's like chess. They strategically set up all their pieces, and then at the right time they strike. And then right? That's what you're speaking to. So most people who are politically immature think, these are just random acts. These are expected, right? But for those of us who are in the know, right, we understand now this is like chess. They got the king, they got the queen over here, they got the rook over here, they got the knight right here, right? They got the bishop over here. The next thing you know, it's checkmate, or as they used to say, back in the Caribbean, it's murder she wrote. Murder she wrote.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
How does this happen, man? They've been watching your ass for days. Remember on training day, Officer Hoyt said, "You've been training this all day, planning this all day." He said, "I've been planning it all week, son."
Yeah.
I've been planning it all week. Please. Right? They've been planning this shit generations in advance.
Right.
So to us, it's just, to our people, it just seems like these are just random events.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've heard Dr. Amos Wilson mention that how we also see, racism and white domination, white supremacy. We tend to see it as some kind of irrational, kind of attack, that they're just doing these things because they just mean.
Right. I've even seen some black folks say, well, these things are happening because it's the last days.
Right.
But if you shut your dumb ass up. Like, for real. Remember on Martin, they'd be like, man, if you would shut your dumb ass up. Like, you always want to smack the shit out of somebody. Like, what is wrong with you?
Yeah, the last days argument. Like I said, my dad, he's a He's a minister, and I mean, I'm actually an atheist. I don't follow none of it. But he tried to, he just tells me, well, these things are happening, son, because Jesus is coming back. It's just these things gotta happen.
Okay,
I
and
actually,
you know what? Okay, I agree with you. Jesus is coming back. Now what you gonna do?
Right.
What
well,
you doing?
see the
You
thing
know?
is, yeah, it's because like if the reason why he mentions Jesus is coming back, what he's trying to say, these things that are happening, it almost like gives it some kind of legitimacy as to these things happening, as these things are normal
Right. So
according to the
if
time.
it's ordained by God, then you can't challenge it.
Right,
Right.
right, right,
Yeah.
right.
So
Wow.
in a sense,
That's
he kind of sanctions. My dad kind of, and I'm not just picking on him particularly, but
hmm
just the ideology. They sanction these things as they are okay because it's part of the script.
Right.
right. It's been prophesied.
Prophesied, right?
Right.
hmm
Great point. Great point. So we in a hell of a situation. But my position has always been, of course, and I even have a conversation with brothers and sisters who are, of course, older than I, who I consider mentors on a personal level, on a professional level, who have helped me navigate my career as an academic. And they all have always stated with me, like, hey, one thing I can always agree with you about, irrespective if I agree with your personal, with your politics, is yes, we need to build what's strong. We need to have strong institutions in our community, and of course, and
Hey,
this, yes, sir.
brother, do you have a book out? I would love to purchase it.
I don't have a book out, but I do have several publications. If you could go to my website, LumumbaSpeaks.com, that's LumumbaSpeaks.com. I will put put that in the chat, and I have several of my publications on my website. That's Lumumba Speaks.
Got you. Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
sir. Absolutely.
Nice.
So
Yeah, I want to definitely read that why Pan-Africanism is it so. I know I don't know. Do you think it's dead, or is it dying, or
well,
is it dead?
so the title of my master's thesis was "Is Pan-Africanism Dead? Examining the efficacy of Garveyism in the age of globalism." And what I would
Got
tell you is that you will get my answer when you read it.
All right, no problem. No
Oh,
problem.
here we go. See,
Hey, you
good,
can't
good
blame me for
answer.
that. You
Good
can't
answer.
blame me for that. That's an innocent
Good
plug.
answer.
That's an innocent plug, right? So yes, but hey, I appreciate you all coming on.
Yes,
Please
sir.
Yes.
share my channel with friends and well wishers. Even dissenting opinions are welcome, of course, on my show. As I always state, facts over feelings. You can't call it a black person. You can't use racial epithets to define black people in any way, shape, or form. And of course, any position a person has, they must undergird it, of course, with factual information. But I appreciate you all coming on the platform. You all are welcome anytime. And of course, but we're going to sign off for now. But once again, I put the title, my website in the chat, and of course, the link to my thesis is in the chat as well. So until next time, I appreciate you all.
Yes, sir.
Make sure you all hit the subscribe and like button, share the channel with your friends and well wishers. Until next time, peace.
All right,
Thank you.
peace.
Just want to let you all know that my next live stream should be in a couple of days, and we're going to be discussing, do black people still have family meetings?
Oh wow.
Man.
All right. Until
All
next
right, I'll be there.
All right. All right.
All right, thanks, man. All right.